the Word of God. But we do that somewhat superficially. Because the Bible is more than the Word of God. It's the thoughts of God as well. Because before you speak, you have thoughts, you think. Although I do know some people who speak before they think, but I'm sure God wasn't one of them. But in order to understand God's thoughts, we have to both read and understand His Word. And too many times we depend on what someone else thinks or what someone else states in order to tell us what we think God is telling us. I can remember going to churches for years and reading Genesis, that God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days. And then He finished His work and He rested. With the implication that God's creation was finished, that it was over. He had done it all. The problem is that when you look at science, you look at the universe, we know that stars are continually being formed and destroyed. And if God's no longer doing that, then maybe He's not required for the changes in the universe. I mean, it says that in Psalm 148, let them praise the name of the Lord, for He spoke, and they were created. You know, if you build a house, or have someone build a house for you, and then it's finished, and the contractor retires, but every few weeks the house changes because there's new rooms added, you really wonder if the contractor did the work in the first place. And many people don't believe there's a God because all this is happening without God's creative ability. And I was always taught in church that God's creation finished after 6 days. But the Bible never says that. It says God rested. It doesn't say He quit.
Amen.
He rested. Isaiah 4:5 goes on to say, and the Lord will create. In chapter 57, verse 19, I create the fruit of the lips. In verse 65:18, for behold, I create new heavens and a new earth. And because we're not sort of taught this or implied this, we lose it. We don't recognize that this creation is still ongoing. In Jeremiah it says, for I know the thoughts that I think towards you, saith the Lord. Thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. See, His creation is His thoughts, what He thinks. And His thoughts are towards us. That's why He tells us that we should always be thinking about Him. It says in James that if you are sick, to pray. If you are in joy and healthy, then praise. To be in communication with God, to be thinking about Him, because He's always thinking about us. In fact, it's important. You see, the trouble with the world is that it looks upon what we see as being the end result. But everything that we consider real has conditions. Nothing exists except for conditions that make it exist. You don't exist. If your internal organs didn't exist, you wouldn't be sitting here. If the cells that make up your internal organs didn't exist, then your organs wouldn't exist and you still wouldn't be sitting here. If the molecules and proteins that make up your cells didn't exist, then your cells wouldn't exist, and neither would your organs, and neither would you. Likewise, if the molecules, the atoms, and electrons, the proteins that make up your molecules didn't exist, you get the drift. And this goes back to the very earliest stages of physics. The fermions, the mesons, the proteons that make up the very building blocks of life. And some of them exist for only many fractions of a second, and new ones are created. So God is creating all the time. But we often don't think of it that way. Because His thoughts and His words are what caused the creation. Robert Spitzer, who was president of Gonzaga University in Georgetown, Washington, a philosopher, put it this way: therefore the Creator must be continuously creating, must be a continuous creator of all else that is real at every moment, because without it, it would cease to be real. In other words, if the Creator stopped thinking about you, you would literally lapse into nothing. Think about it. It's His constant thoughts towards His creation that keep us here. That's why Jeremiah says, I know the thoughts I have of you. His thoughts towards us. In 1 Chronicles, it was stated this way: and you, Solomon, my son, know you, the God of your father, and serve Him with a perfect heart and with a willing mind. For Jehovah searches all hearts and understands all the imaginations of the thoughts. If you seek Him, He will be found. But if you forsake Him, He will cast you off forever. Think about it. Think about Him. Because it's His thoughts that keep you here. His constant creation, His constant creative thoughts and words in the Bible, in the world. Just something to consider.